Hello, everyone. So thank you for coming. For the people that are on the back, I see one guy that is exactly on the opposite corner. Hello. Hello. I don't know, maybe sleeping. But please come forward. So the room is big, and we are not that many. But that's good because it means we can interact a lot. Yeah? And I want this to be interactive because this is not the fantastic, crazy, super solution, super duper that we found to keep everything in Jenkins, but that's the way that works for us. But I wanted to interact with you guys to understand, do you have the same problem? And do you have a different solution? Can we work together to find a way to make this platform, this amazing platform is called Jenkins, a lot better in managing logs? So that's the topic, Jenkins forever. Keep everything forever. Okay, so about who we are, so the people that were in the previous talk in the big room, so I'm still the same guy, and still Luca, and my company is Gerrit Code. So we are focused on open source. We have been contributing to Jenkins for over 10 years. We are the company that supports the development and the enterprise support of Gerrit Code Review. How many of you are using Gerrit Code Review? That's good, a lot of people. That is applicable to Gerrit. Actually, but this is a different perspective. We'll tell you how different is this one. And we have been really fond of gathering logs. So we like logs. We believe that logs are really the point where you can find the solutions to your problems. The problem is that the logs are big, and you need something big to manage them. So agenda. So we're going to see, first of all, what was our use case. And it could be that our use case is different from yours, because every use case is different. But we're going to see what the problems we are facing and why we went to this situation and this solution. And again, the majority of the discussion wants to be between us. Yeah? And because there are lots of people from CloudBees, and there are other people from other companies that maybe they want similar ideas. Let's work together. Let's get some ideas better. Okay, so that's the context. So I'm from Gerrit Code. I'm coming here with the different roles. So I'm the build manager, CI/CD manager of the Gerrit Code Review project as well. And the reason is simple, because nobody wanted to do it. So I remember 2-3 years ago, and we said, guys, it's crazy. We don't have a proper CI environment. Can someone do it? Because there were a lot of contributors in Gerrit. They're actually doing a build manager as main job. So we say, why don't you do it? Oh, I'm busy. No, I need to do something else. Oh, my gosh, my day is already so full. So, OK. In the meantime, we will put something up. And let's see if someone else can come and volunteer. Still waiting. So do you want to volunteer? No? No, Frank, no. Too busy as well. OK, so at the end of the day, then I created a gerrit-ci.gerritforge.com because the main site for a Gerrit Code Review project to review is called Gerrit Review. So I created a Gerrit CI, gerritforge.com. And it's just a Jenkins instance. We wanted just to change a little bit the colors, branding a little bit, but it's Jenkins. It's not Gerrit Forge custom installation. It's just Jenkins, a Jenkins 2.0. And as you guys, sometimes the builds are green, sometimes are red. Stable 2.4 was red 4 days ago, Frank. If you're on 2.14, careful. And sometimes are going just well. Just every CI environment, yeah? OK, so I wanted to just spend a little bit of time showing our use case, because otherwise you don't understand why we did the things in this way. So first of all, I had to admit we haven't moved to the Jenkins file yet. So we are still using the flow thing, the one based on Groovy. That was I would say, the predecessor of the Jenkins file, the Groovy flow, right? And that was working fine for us so far. But I made a workshop on Tuesday to show how can you move from this one to a proper Jenkins file, because I want to do that. But the flow works in this way. So first of all, we have what we call a verifier flow. That is the equivalent of the Jenkins file that manages the full workflow, right? And this guy, as we can't use the Gerrit Trigger plugin because we can't use stream events, because Google doesn't allow us to use any stream events, this guy works in a very simple way. It just goes to Gerrit and say, hello, man, do you have something new for us? So just using REST API to Gerrit to understand what he needs to build. And there is some very complex logic. I'm not going to the details, and it's going to make sure that you're not going to build something that you know is going to fail. So when the verifier flow understands that there is something to be built, doesn't do the building with a sequence of events, but tries to execute as many things as possible in parallel. So if it finds out that there are, I don't know, 25 or 50 or 100 changes that needs to be built, just spins them all in parallel. We had problems with the scalability of the nodes that we went to Google and they say, look, no problem, how many nodes do we want? Well, I would like to have 10 nodes, maybe 64 CPU each. I say, no problem. Should we do 50 nodes and maybe 128 CPUs each? I say, looks good to me. So we don't have problems of allocating server resources. Just because the project is run by Google, that they were saying they've got plenty of servers in their server room. I didn't know that. And at the end of the day, we can spin as much as we want. Yeah? And so we spin a lot of parallel stuff to a different job that is called the verifier change. The verifier change is another pipeline. So in our workflow, we already have the concept of multiple pipelines, and they are chained one together. And different pipelines have different focus. The first one is just to understand exactly what makes sense to start building, and the second is the real one that does the build. But actually, this one doesn't really the build itself, but just define the steps. And then each one of them allocates another bunch of jobs. So just to give you some idea, every single change generates something like, let's say, 8 to 10 parallel builds, every single change. We may even build, let's say, 50 changes in parallel. We do lots of builds just for one project, yeah? I can imagine, don't apply this one maybe to your projects. If you've got 100 projects, I don't know, maybe you need to exhaust all the resources in Google itself. But it's a lot, it's a lot. We generate a lot if you consider it's just one open source project, that is Gerrit Code Review. So the Bazel builds, we use Bazel as a build system. How many of you have heard of a Bazel build? Okay, that's good. We really like it, it's really fast. And gives you a lot of way to provide a lot of feedback because there's a lot of cool stuff such as retrying, test, and so on, and detecting flaky stuff and so on. Okay, so once we have the results, and the results could be in multiple forms, could be works or doesn't work, or could be works but the code doesn't follow the guidelines of our formatting standards, or works but follows the guideline, but you change some dependencies on the project. So we have multiple feedback. And so it's not just good or bad, it's multiple. And we can't represent all this feedback in Jenkins, just because in Jenkins, the build is either red, yellow, or green, or blue, sorry, because we always use the green balls, yeah? And that's the problem. You don't have so much granularity. So where do you have the ability to give a lot of flags in granularity? In Gerrit. So we say, okay, the results of the build doesn't have to stay in Jenkins because you don't have the ability to represent this stuff. And the developers, they're working on the code, so they don't really go all the time to Jenkins, but they look at their code. So let's put the feedback back to their code, back to Gerrit. So whenever there is a result, this is not given directly from the Bazel build, but is done by the verifier change because there is a lot of complex logic to avoid invalid feedback. How many times you run a build and you say, oh my gosh, that was failed? Yeah, I know, because that was just some temporary failure. Just ignore it. So we needed to automate a lot. So the verifier change is not just responsible for defining the pipeline, but even to gather all this feedback and have a clever reasoning around them to understand, okay, what does really mean? And what does really mean then is pushed back to Gerrit Code Review. And that's really good because, first of all, we can extract from the logs the information that is meaningful for the developers, so the developer doesn't have to go to the log all the time, because how many times you get a feedback build failed, you get a huge log of 15K, you say, yeah, where? I don't have a clue. In this case, the verifier change is smart because he gets the build, because it's groovy, so gets the log, then understand what's going on, try to extract the information that is relevant to the developer, and push it back to Gerrit as a message, right? So in Gerrit, you got a meaningful result. Then the people wanted to be even more meaningful, so I started adding even some icons, fancy stuff, and the people say, oh, we love it. So the people were happy. And if they're happy, they don't complain, and I can do other stuff, yeah? Okay, so what's the problem? The problem is that, yeah, you can extract some information, but sometimes the people, in order to troubleshoot the problem, they need to go to Jenkins. And those are developers. Yeah, they use Jenkins sometimes, but they are not really, let's say, looking at Jenkins all the time. So they wanted a deep link. They wanted to say, listen, I don't want to go by myself and look exactly where is the problem. Just add one extra link into the code review and tell me, listen, if the information is not there, is not enough, go and follow this link and go there. Looks good to me, looks good to them, it was working. But then there was a problem, numbers. Okay, believe me, for a single project, we have 300 jobs. One project, 300 jobs. We had 170,000 builds, one project. 4.8 millions of jar artifacts, still one project. And 1.7 billion lines of log, still one project. That's quite a lot, yeah? How does Jenkins behave when you keep all this stuff on the server? Raise your hand if you know the answer. What's the answer? Shout all together. Slow down, doesn't work. Oh my gosh, that's a problem. So I was talking with some CloudBees guys, and they know that's a problem. So they're working on it, right? And it's good that we can discuss the issue together. We can find a solution together, right? There was even Kosuke, I think last year, he was telling that the focus of CloudBees was working on the logs, because it's insane that Jenkins doesn't work in this situation, because you guys work in large corporations and you don't have just one project like me. But you got how many projects? Hundreds? Thousands? And can you just multiply this one by 100, by 1,000? It's insane. So Jenkins will never work. So I say to the guys in the mailing list, okay, there are a lot of problems why, let's say, Jenkins behaves in this way. And okay, then I say, okay, let's have a look on what CloudBees says about solving this problem. And I just Googled it, and I found this link, that one. And CloudBees says, yeah, how can you delete all builds? Best strategies for cleanup and disk space management. That makes sense. This is what you can do at the moment. But I'm going to give you a very small example of what you're doing. So the logs are the source of the knowledge of what happens in your system, right? So the logs is your gold mining, right? The logs are your gold. You're telling me that, hold on, yeah, I know I got all this gold there, but my safe is too small. How can I solve the problem? And here the solution is, don't worry, get the gold, destroy it, because so it can fit your safe. I said, that's not good. It's not good enough, yeah? Because there must be a better solution for that. Okay, so this is what happens. So the people, they go to, the left side is the stream of feedback you got in a change. And as you can see, I provide now some very nice and colorful feedback to the Gerrit Code reviewers. They have the nice Gerrit Forge logo, and they know that a specific configuration of build failed, and that's the link. And then they started using it. They got excited about that. And they were saying, look, Jenkins is not working. Why? Oh, because I followed the backlink and give me a 404. And I started explaining, Jenkins is not able to manage so many logs and blah, blah, blah. They need to be removed. And I know I can't keep more, I don't know, than 1,000 changes and so on. And they would say, yeah, but during the hackathon, we do a lot of work. So it means that if I get your feedback and I'm busy and going out for lunch and come back, it's not there anymore. So when the project gets bigger and the flow of information gets very intense, this solution is not just not scalable. It doesn't work at all. So I say, guys, okay, help me out. We are a small company. Yeah, I can't put all these resources myself and so on. I need a little bit more disk space. It's fine. Just tell me how much do you want. For how long should I keep the things online on my CI system, right? Because I can't do it, yeah? And we want to keep Jenkins running. And they answer to me, look, the answer is simple. Forever. You should never remove anything. Because their point was fair. They were saying, listen, because the information is there, it's not just meaningful for me to understand exactly what happened for my change, but it's meaningful for us as a project, because if we know exactly what happened, how long did it take each phase, we can understand as well that maybe a specific change that we merged in Gerrit is producing maybe a constant slowdown of the performance. And in Google, they use Gerrit Code Review for everything. Every single project they do is based on code review. They've got something like, I think last time they said 5 million repositories, something like 700,000 people using it. And there are other guys that are using Gerrit, if they share the statistics, is always talking about, let's say, thousands, 100,000s, or even millions of things are happening, yeah? And they were saying, listen, there is no way that we are going to throw this out, yeah? And they were saying, listen, look, think about something, yeah? Because now you are the CI manager. You solve the problem. I say, oh my gosh, how can I do it? Okay, so they wanted, first of all, they say, okay, I don't accept compromising on speed. Jenkins is to be fast. Okay, point taken. Second, you can't remove anything. We want to keep everything there. And the last point is, you can't tell me that, yeah, it's not there, but it's archived in S3. You go and look in S3 or go to, I don't know, Elasticsearch to do this search. You will say, look for your log. They will say, listen, our job is to write code. We want a link, has to work. Make it work. I like it. Challenges, yeah? So and I will say, okay, let's keep calm. I'm working in the UK. I'm in the UK, so keep calm, take my time. And I thought about something. And let's have a look what I came up with, yeah? So first of all, I started thinking about, so this is the real example where I took the screenshot. So this one is fairly recent. Is Alice Kober-Sotek. I don't know the pronunciation. Is based in Germany. She did that change, it's fine. And then she had some changes. Some of them were broken. And some of them they were successful. And the CI is this one. Yeah, Gerrit CI is a bit small, but it's Gerrit CI, gerritforge.com, and so on. So let's have a look at what we did with this one. So basically, if we go to this specific job, let me check one second. It was the, verify Bazel. So let's go there. Open a new tab. There we go. Okay, fine. Now I'll show the configuration of master, but it's fine. Okay. So I started doing something very, very basic. I say, okay, when I don't know what to do, the first thing that I'm doing is just sending the problem to someone else. Happens, yeah? So I say, okay, I don't know what to do with Jenkins, but I know Jenkins is not good in doing it, yeah? Okay, so first of all, I don't want to manage files, yeah? I just want to send stuff somewhere else as soon as possible. So I always loved one feature in Jenkins that is plugins, and there is a nice plugin that is called stream events to something else. I like this feature in Gerrit. It exists in Jenkins as well, so I used it. So what I did was, first of all, sending all the logs to Logstash. And this plugin is called Logstash, but doesn't actually send it to Elastic Logstash. It's just sending to any stream that I want. And I use RabbitMQ. I did a workshop on Tuesday where I showed what you can do with those logs, but I'm going to show here what you can do again in a different way with that type of event. That information is really nice because it doesn't store only the log message. It stores the metadata associated with it. And that's really good because metadata means exactly what was the timestamp that log was produced, exactly what was the build number associated to that log, what was the SHA-1 related to the change that triggered that log, a lot of information. So it means there's not anymore just a file with some text that someone can interpret or not, but it's already a very minimal piece of information. It is telling me, okay, that's an event, that happened, that generated this compilation error or successful, and those were the things that were related to that, okay? So if we have a look on, I don't remember if I published this instance on the internet, because this is not a demo system, this is the live system. But I can show you how the JSON look like in a sample project. So I just imported this project in IntelliJ here to show you how it looks like, the specific JSON produced here. 1 second, it's starting. There we go. Let's have a look if it is the right one. I believe so, yeah. Okay, yeah, that's the one. Now I'm going to increase the font, so don't worry, don't have to wear your glasses now. So let's go to source. There we go. Okay, let's get one of these, and let me put maybe two JSON lints. Okay, getting there. Okay, so this is how the log looks like. As you can see, it's much more than just a line in a file. So it's telling me who was the source host that has produced this log, because you may have not just one CI system, you may have maybe 10, maybe 15, maybe 100. So as you put in everything into a data lake, you need to know where the data is coming from. The exact timestamp that this message has been produced. And this is good because it doesn't require to go and configure all the different log wrapper in all the different jobs to generate the timestamp. You know exactly when this happened. And this is UTC time, so you don't have the problem on different time zone. Then you got all the data related to the project. So you got the build number, what's the root one, the display number, what was the full display name. If there were some additional variables, in this case, I know exactly what is the container ID as well that has generated a specific log, because sometimes happens in when you have a lot of different containers, maybe even 50 or 100, some of them are misbehaving. So some of them, if they start misbehaving for every single build, maybe based on that, you want to do something, you want to just put it offline by saying, listen, it's not possible that all the builds that are starting on these type of containers are starting failing. And then you get other information, and at the end of the day, you get even your messages, yeah? So I said, that's good. I said, when the build started and when this log was produced. Okay, looks good to me, but again, I can't give this one to developers because they will say, listen, the log is there. I say, okay, so what? I needed to do something, but now I'm facing a different problem. I'm facing those 1.7 billion lines of log, and I don't know, maybe at least, let's say, 100 billion JSON files. So I need now to process this data in order to get some analytics, in order to understand what's going on, and at the end of the day, to produce exactly the log file that Jenkins removed, okay? So I needed someone to help me out, someone that is good with a lot of data. So Mr. Spark helped me out. So Spark is a system, is actually a framework that allows you to manage very large amount of data with very large clusters of machines. And as the guys from Google are telling me they can give me the machines, so I'm for it and just need a way to use it. So I just defined a simple Spark job that is doing this stuff. So I will show you here. So Spark can be used in different ways with many programming languages. I'm a Scala guy, so I use the Scala, but if you fancy Python, you can use it in Python. You can use it in many other ways. There is the ability as well to use it interactively. There are many, many ways. And the basic things that I did was, first of all, getting all this amount of data. And in Spark, you have a concept that's called RDD. That is a redundant distributed data set. So it means that even if this data is, I don't know, in S3 or in 1,000 of other machines, I just tell Spark, get them all. And Spark does it for me. That's good. I like when other people does work for me. And what I needed to do was, first of all, as these fields, they start with the add character. That one is not good for Scala. I need to translate into a simple timestamp here. And the way to say, can you please parse all these JSON in Spark is as easy as that. .json, give the RDD, parse it all, and does it for me. That's good. Then I needed to do something more. So I needed to say now you need to transform this data because first of all, you need to get rid of the data that is not interesting for me. Because when you start then getting all the logs from Jenkins, you get the good logs, you get the bad logs as well, right? And you don't want your processing to fail just because you got some of the records, they are not valid, right? I want to distill the information that is meaningful, yeah, for my Gerrit contributor. So I just defined some very simple stuff. That is, the first one is just give me all the paths of the URI, because at the end of the day, I wanted basically to avoid that 404. Because they wanted to do just one thing. Give me a deep link. I don't want a 404 anymore. So I said, OK, I get the logs, I get the link, and I make sure that I produce exactly the same thing. Even if Jenkins doesn't have the element anymore. If the file is not in Jenkins there, I want to rebuild that information exactly in the same way. So I'm getting all the different paths that I need to rebuild. And what I do, based on the path of the single build, I want to extract from all the different information that is in the data set, and I want to get rid of, let's say, the null data. Sometimes you got logs with nothing. Even when the URL is nothing, get rid of it. And I want to select just the one that corresponds to my path. OK? That's good. Good so far. But then the problem is that the logs get broken down in different messages. I need to put them in the correct order. How can I do that? Oh, there is a timestamp. Good. So I use the timestamp field to sort them all in the correct way. And whilst I'm there, I'm saying it's very useful for the people even to understand what was the time that a specific step was done. Because if they realize that there was a task that was taking 5 minutes, they can look at that. And then I put everything together, and I collect back my fantastic message. So the message that is rematerialized from the JSON files looks in this way. As open square brackets, then the entire timestamp in UTC time, close square brackets, and then I got the message. And then after that, I just publish back. So what's the result? So the result is this one. So if I go, let me go back to this guy. Yeah. So if Alice goes back and opens this in a new tab, what she gets back is this. Say, OK, looks good to me. I go to all the different timestamps and so on. Looks good, yeah. So there is all my logs. So my Gerrit contributors are so happy now because they can see the logs again. They have the impression that it's coming from Jenkins because we'll just copy and paste the URL in a larger font here. There we go. So that's the URL. Looks like a Jenkins URL, right? So the Jenkins base is gerritci.gerritforge.com/job/verifier-basil 29058 console text. But in reality, this job is gone in Jenkins. It's not there anymore. But I rematerialized everything in a way that looks exactly the same place. OK, so that was the solution. People are happy. I want to show you a little bit of an additional trick that I did for doing that. Because I needed to brand a little bit this Jenkins, so what I did was just putting Jenkins behind an Nginx, right? As most of the people do. You don't expose Jenkins straight away. You want to do some additional security, or maybe you want to rebrand it with your company or whatever. So if we go to the CI, and this is the real CI, you see, because it's taking time. There we go. So basically, I go to my Nginx definition, conf-d, and go to the Gerrit CI. There we go. All the different ciphers, proxy paths, and that's the trick. So I needed to do anyway some kind of remapping for the images, the one that you saw for the rev wrapping. So I said, OK, why don't I use the same trick for doing the remapping of the log files as well? Because Nginx is great because it allows me to define some retry mechanism. So I said, listen, as I don't know if the log has been already materialized, because I don't do the materialization all the time. I do just when it's needed. So maybe every hour, it's fine. So the logs could be actually already still in Jenkins, or could have been materialized somewhere else. So what is doing this guy is saying, OK, whenever someone is asking you for a console text, first of all, is the text plain? Don't worry. And you check if this one has been materialized into the Gerrit CI directory. So because my Spark job processes this massive amount of data, and at the end of the day, produces still some files. And the good thing is that those files can be located even somewhere else, and typically are located somewhere else. So they will not be stored into the same machine where Jenkins is, because I want Jenkins to know nothing about those files. Because if Jenkins knows about those files, Jenkins slows down. They are in a different machines. Actually, they are going to be stored in a distributed file system, and it will be there. And if those ones have not been materialized yet, then go back to Jenkins. And if you see, for instance, I rewrite as well how the files are stored. So this is a typical notation in Spark when you store intermediate files. And that's what you got in the output. So from the point of the user, whenever you are in Jenkins, you go to the console. If it has not been materialized, you see the one in Jenkins. When it's been materialized, you see the one that is lasting forever. And the good thing is that from now on, whenever you go into your code review, you get some backlinks, those links will be active forever. Jenkins doesn't know about that because Jenkins is not able to manage that yet. But when Jenkins will be able to understand them, we'll be able to render that in Jenkins. But at the end of the day, the majority of the developers, they don't look at Jenkins all the time. They look at the code. They look at the code review. And if they see the information they need, if the link is there, if the link is working, they're happy. If they're happy, I'm happy too. Okay? Question? Yeah, go.
Are you also storing the job parameters in the environment?
Okay, so the question was, are you storing as well the job parameters into the metadata? The answer is yes. So you can understand as well not just the message, but from which job was coming, what were the parameters, and what was the environment as well related to that. So it means, that's a very good question, because it means that at the moment I show just this application, but I can do much more. So I can go back in time, because this one is not just backup of my logs. Because some of the people may say, look, why you are doing all this mess? Get the logs, put to a shared storage, done. No, it's not done, because when the logs are on a file, a text file, it's too late. I want to keep all these metadata, because this metadata is the gold. The log message is just a very simple part of that information. The metadata is the one that allows me to say, for instance, this log was related to this SHA-1. I was talking to Frank before. He was telling me that what the people want is giving me a SHA-1 and tell me where the SHA-1 is. What happened to this SHA-1? What was his story? How long did it take end to end? Where this SHA-1 had problems? When it was successful? Yeah? Okay, by keeping the metadata as well, including the parameters, you can answer those questions. Yeah, let me just go back to the slide, because just to put this one, because we were exactly in the Q&A. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so the question was, what about the management of the annotation of the logs? How do you manage that? They should be done in the master. It can't be done somewhere else because it requires a lot of logic. So in this case, if you look at the source code, the log-stash plugin actually hooks into those as well and invokes those ones as well. So for instance, all the masking of passwords is already managed. So the log-stash plugin does actually that. And go and get it, because it's running in the master, the plugin, executes all that logic, and the same result you will see on the screen is exactly the one that goes there. It doesn't do on the environment. Imagine that imagine for instance, the typical case, imagine you've got environment variables, right? You've got some passwords there. I'm not sure it does it on that part. But the log-stash plugin is open source, so we could fix it that one as well. The log-stash plugin has been quite not so much overlooked in the past, because it's lacking some of the features of the pipelines. This adjustment I'm going to provide as well as per request.
It's still relying on the annotation on the master.
Yeah,
You're externalizing
absolutely.
a lot of the raw I/O in this case.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the annotations, they are kept in the master. Yeah. Yeah, go on.
Did you look at storing the HTML log to keep the color of the console log?
Yeah, that's a good point. So the question was, what about the HTML logs and the coloring of the logs? I have to say that those ones typically, they have problems in rendering sometimes, but they are getting stored into the message. Typically, they are managed not really as yeah, you can use the HTML as well, but they are kept into the message. So if you want them, re-render them exactly as they were, yes, you can, because they're kept into the message. But if you want, for instance, to filter them out because you want people not just to look at the tags into your local message, you can filter this out. In our case, in Gerrit, we don't use it. So we just got plain text, so we just get plain text. That's it. But you could do it, yeah. Just one thing. So if you had a different solution, come forward, yeah, and tell me how you solve the problem.
For certain project, people have to set up the project-based security so that some people can access certain automation project. Using Logstash, if you have the link, you still see the logs from the secret project that you're not supposed to.
Okay, yeah, that's a very good point. So the point is you can define some ACLs in Jenkins to say that some of the projects are visible, others are completely secret, invisible. And that is managed as long as you stay in Jenkins. But if you start doing this type of solution, let's say you could have a URL that is a kind of backdoor, right? Because you have offloaded the log somewhere else, and you go straight to the log, and you get this URL, you find out. Yeah, that's a very good point. So in our case, the project is open source. There's nothing secret, and everything is published on the internet, so it's absolutely there. But that's a very good point. This is a point that you may want, let's say, to go and enforce. My suggestion will be that actually the solution could be done easily on the same Nginx where you host Jenkins. Or you could just develop a simple plugin in Jenkins. They're going to say, listen, you're coming through me anyway. So at this moment, it's done in Nginx. But you could have done as a Jenkins plugin. So you could have said, listen, I'm a plugin. I'm just listening to the HTTP request. I'm going to enforce the same policies that Jenkins has. But instead of asking Jenkins API and Jenkins log, I'm going to ask maybe an external system for the logs. But that's a very good point. And my suggestion will be, yeah, you just maybe do a different implementation just in the viewing part. Yeah?
So the description talks about artifacts. I'm from JFrog, so obviously
Yeah.
you're pretty obsessed with that.
Yeah.
How are you keeping your artifacts forever?
We use JFrog. No, so the question was, how do you keep the artifacts forever? So the answer is, so we just needed, we needed a place to store it. And at that time, we asked Google, and they said no. And we asked JFrog, and they say, yeah, Bintray is a limited support for open source project. But the CEO of JFrog contacted me and said, listen, you guys can use as much as you want. So we keep all the artifacts in Bintray. And because that's the way that we can allow everyone to go and download the artifacts. But I believe the archiving of the artifacts is not really the big problem. It's already, as you said, they're already out-of-the-box solution from commercial software providers and works just well. But we find that logs are the problem, yeah. Okay, so just to repeat the statement, if I understood correctly, you were saying that anyway, the access control in Gerrit works very well anyway. So yeah, you could get that URL, but to get that URL, you need to go through the access control in Gerrit that is super secure. My suggestion would be, yeah, you could even, let's say, encrypt the URL. So at the moment, the URL is a kind of a plain text URL, so you may guess what is the URL. And even if you don't have access to it, you just can go and loop through it. You can even say, OK, why let's just encrypt the URL. So in a way that it is not, let's say, easily forged by someone else. And the only way to know the URL is to go through the access control in Gerrit. And when you get the access control in Gerrit, that's the URL. That's it. Say it again, sorry? Yep. Has that ever failed? So yeah, that may fail itself, but the beauty of that is that when it's failing, it's not impacting, let's say, the presence of everything else. So as it is not going to a centralized system, let me just give you an example. So you could use the Logstash directly to push to Elasticsearch, for instance, right? You could say, OK, I configure Jenkins to go and push directly to Elasticsearch. So look, I don't have a problem anymore. But then the tool becomes your bottleneck. The tools become your single point of failure because then oh my gosh, if whatever reason Elasticsearch is down or is slow and so on, I'm lost. Here, the Logstash plugin is used just the first moment of taking the data and put it somewhere else. And that if that one is down, okay, for that specific moment, that information is not there, okay, I can still go back and get it later, but whatever I produce is still there. Because the big problem is not when maybe a couple of changes, they don't have the logs. The big problem is when nobody can see the logs. Yeah. Yeah. In this case, yeah. So the question was, imagine that the execution of those jobs, they had problems with the execution of the Logstash wrapper. Those logs have not generated, let's say, the equivalent JSON. Yeah, in that case, I need to go and query the APIs. With the APIs in Jenkins, I can get that information. I can query the APIs in Jenkins and get that information. You can set up alarms as well. And it's not, again, the impact anyway is low because maybe you have impacted, I don't know, maybe 50 jobs or 1,000 runs, but it's not impacting your history. But yeah, that's the point. That's a good point. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, so the question was, are you pushing directly to S3 or to Google Storage? Yeah, that's the plan. That's the plan, to push directly there. But I'm not going exactly directly there from Jenkins. I'm going through an async system. So because I don't want, the Jenkins node for me is super precious. I don't want to overload that load with anything. I don't want to be dependent on anything. So that one just goes into RabbitMQs, and that data gets offloaded somewhere else. And that somewhere else, there is one agent that is using Elastic Logstash, but you could use whatever you want. Is just consuming from the RabbitMQ queues and storing into the long-term storage. It could be, in our case, we'll go to Google Storage, but in your company, if you're using S3, you can go to S3, or if you're using even a SAN, I don't know, you can just store there. Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, question? Yep. Yeah, that's a very good point. So the question was, okay, you say you're keeping forever, but if you need to clean because some projects are over, or maybe they're too old and so on, how would you do the cleanup mechanism of those logs if you really have to clean them up? So the way that I'm doing now is just basically organizing them in different folders at the moment. So I will give you some CI jobs. No, sorry, not this one. Logstash. There we go. Okay, as you can see, the structure is done in this way. So that's the input queue. Then you've got the year, you've got the month and the day, you've got the hour. So imagine that you want to say, listen, yeah, I know I should keep it forever, but now it's been 5 years, it's been 10 years, I really don't need them anymore. Bear in mind that these ones, they are just staged here for the time being, but they will go to a long-term storage. You typically use the tools that you are in your long-term storage to clean them out. You typically don't do very fine grain because you really don't have to and you really don't need it. If you remove a project, maybe you don't want to remove it straight away, all the logs, unless you have got some sensitivity or I don't know, some secret information was eavesdropped there, you want to remove it. In that case, you need to do a specific Spark job for doing that. Otherwise, you just give an organization of your data and just clean them up in this way. And this is what typically you do in big data projects as well. So you give a kind of hierarchy in terms of the storage in a way that is very easy for you to identify some segments on time. And even because in terms of the processing, you never process everything all together, right? So you typically do in two ways. You do some daily batches where you get the majority of the log processed, and during the day you do some streaming of the stuff that is coming through. So in a way that you don't, let's say, waste CPU cycles, doing, let's say, big batches all the time, and you do when, let's say, the system is more free to do other job. Because even when you stream those logs and you do this processing, you use a lot of bandwidth. So you want to save that bandwidth for the other people. So the majority of the work you do in a certain period of time, and then you do streaming during the day. Okay, I think we are done. So thank you guys for coming, and just want to remind you that we are still here in the conference. This is where we are. And last but not least, so for the guys that use Gerrit, come to London, 2nd and 3rd of October. There will be a user summit where we are going to see even more related to this topic and to other topics. And if you have any further questions, come to our booth in the exhibition area, or come to London. We will continue the discussion, and we'll see much more from Gerrit and from Jenkins as well. Thank you very much.